Right. And this is the next session. The next session. So the session 4, news from the language communities. Just as a very, very brief intro. Yeah, and the European language grid already gives it away. Of course, we are not doing a national project here. ELG is supposed to establish the primary language technology platform and marketplace in Europe to tackle the fragmentation of the European landscape. And we want to enable the European LT community to use ELG. So Europe is the keyword here. We don't have the time, unfortunately, to talk about all languages and all countries that we have represented in ELG and the National Competence Center network that we are operating or that we have set up as ELG. But we can at least talk about some of these, yeah? So a couple of selected examples. And so just for those of you who are not aware of what the NCCs are, ELG has set up 32 national competence centers as an international network of national networks to broaden ELG's reach and to identify content for ELG and to interest companies in ELG, essentially to support the mission of the ELG project. And as we've just heard in the previous session, there is a very strong connection to the European Language Equality Project. So, and so far, so first of all, the NCCs, you can see them on the website using this link here, and there have been a number of activities already. They do function as the national bridge and the national contact point to the ELG project and platform. They organize, and we already had a couple of those this year. They organize one or more regional, national ELG workshops. We had some in Switzerland, in Poland, in Bulgaria, among others. They distribute ELG dissemination material. They promote ELG through participation in regional or national conferences, and they do desk research, such as the helping with the population of the ELG catalog as presented yesterday with additional organizations, both commercial and academic, in the ELG repository. And we work together on joint publications, obviously. So, and today in this session, we don't have the time or the space to fit in all 32, which is of course unfortunate, but we picked these that are now emphasized here on the slide. So we have represented today Belgium, Bulgaria, France, Poland, and Spain in this alphabetical order. There is a dash box around Finland, and I will tell you why in a minute. So this is the order of the presentations today. You do know Walter Dalemans and Svetla Koeva and Maciej Ogrodniczuk and Marta Villegas and François Yvon, our colleagues from the countries I just mentioned, but you probably do not know Marko Turpinen from 1001 Lakes. That's an unusual name. That's the name of a company that Marko is running in Finland. So before now, Walter, Svetla, Maciej, Marta, and François will talk about the recent developments for about 5 minutes each in their countries and their regions. Marko will talk about an interesting development that is taking place in Finland. And I do not want to spoil it. Maybe you already know it, but it's an interesting development, which is also why we decided to give Marko a bit more time. So in the next 10 minutes, Marko will present this idea that they have been developing in Finland. And after that, we will give the floor for about 5 minutes each to the other colleagues. And then the session will wrap up with a question and answer session. That's the structure of the session now. Okay, and having said that, I would like to hand over to Marko. I hope he is online already. Excellent, very good. Marko, the floor is yours. I have the slides here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Georg. Very pleased to be here today in Meta Forum. I do have an academic connection as well. I'm affiliated with Aalto University and a fairly long history with working in universities and together with universities. But in this context, so I am representing a company where we did a consulting work for the Finnish state development company called Bake. And that's the V logo on this slide. And the idea was to look into whether there is an opportunity to create a new entity in Finland to promote the use of language resources, especially for novel AI applications. And that was then done by us, me and my colleague Olli Pitkänen. So next slide, please. A bit of a background for this. So first of all, this is a continuum of development. So this was raised as one of important themes that the state development company wanted to study. And there was a pre-study conducted by the University of Helsinki, actually people you probably know. So Krista Lindén, Tommi Jauhiainen, and Mietta Lennes from University of Helsinki did a pre-study on what could be done. And there were a couple of things then that were suggested as follow-ups, and I will talk a little bit about the Donate Speech campaign later, but then there was also a proposal that let's study whether there is room for a new organization and also look at the legal issues related to different language resources, their usage, especially in the context of really promoting commercial use for the language resources. And then these studies were done in the first part of the year mainly, and at the latter part of this year. So, and this is where we are now. So there was a group formed based on the study to look into actually starting a new legal entity in Finland, going through different investor discussions and also potentially getting other state-owned organizations to support this, namely Business Finland mostly. And that's where we are now. So that's a little bit the overall story, and I'll explain then the details of how we got here and what we have thought of that this language a platform, or in Finnish, kielialusta, what it could do. Oh, one more thing to note, that we are looking at resources for languages that are used, official languages in Finland. So that's not only Finnish, it's also Swedish and Sami languages. So maybe some of you know, but for example, we have a Swedish minority, and Swedish is an official Finnish language. Anyway, so then next slide. Some of these activities were already brought to attention in this community, or I assume there is a fairly large overlap. Because there was a consultation by DG Connect for Digital Europe program, and I just happened to get this report from Krista Lindén, who was there, and there it was mentioned that this initiative in Finland was seen as interesting and also maybe something that other countries could get motivated by, and that's a little bit why I'm here today, because I agree. I think there is something that could be of interest to other European countries as well. Next slide. And one of the things that we have done is this Donate Speech campaign. So this is actually run by the University of Helsinki and Finnish broadcasting company YLE. So YLE really put quite a lot of effort in publicizing this. There's been, ads about this campaign on the Finnish television, and the target is to get more than 5,000 hours of Finnish speech, unstructured, different dialects, different language, different age groups, as broadly as possible. I think the current number is somewhere over 3,000, so there's still a bit of way to go, but it's already quite promising, and will be a major resource for spoken Finnish. And now one question is, okay, well, who's going to take this up, and how do we really get most out of it? And especially the commercial side, how could we get more use for this and other similar large resources that are available, but especially in the commercial sphere, we think that are underused. Next slide. So I don't think that I need to motivate too much this sort of broader picture that there is societal need, there is a business need, the small language groups are underserved in the overall picture, and the need is growing for different applications. And as mentioned earlier in the previous session, speech, for example, definitely is going to be more and more used in interfaces, and so the growth on the demand side seems to be there, but the structural situation is that smaller languages are disadvantaged, and the kind of let's say the normal commercial mechanisms might not allow as much development as fast as we would like. And then the question is, does this need some kind of a boost, some kind of a push also at the national level? Next slide. Well, the analysis is that there is kind of a market failure. So there is no single player in Finland that would currently see this as their role of being the booster, being sort of the collector of the resources. And the language bank by the universities and Center for Scientific Computation in Finland is doing an excellent job, but it's not that community's job is not really to push for the commercial use. So again, if we look for kind of broader applications, how do we get these resources in the hands of AI developers? How do we really make sure that these get to real applications? So there needs to be something more, and that's the analysis, that there needs to be a new entity that would take this role and boost the usage of the resources. Next slide. So the recommendation is that there would be a new entity started. Kielialusta is that's language platform in Finnish, and the role of this entity would be to well, create this platform where the resources are collected and fill the market gap, but also then increase the competitiveness of the companies in Finland that are creating products and really boost the industry around language technologies and AI technologies development in general in Finland. So that's maybe the little bit the larger ecosystem goal that's inbuilt, and the idea, let's say, the idea was that the initial funding would also come from this Finnish state development company Vake. That got a little bit more complicated because of the corona and several kind of priority issues related to the Vake organization. I won't go into details, but in any case, that's still an option, but it perhaps didn't work exactly like we were thinking at the end of spring. Next slide. And so the idea is that there is this ecosystem of partners that would be supported. I won't go into details, but this kind of gives you an overview of the different players and kind of the value promise that would be so really serving the companies that are developing these resources, and not only them, but also the larger organizations that might be developing the services or using the services, and then trying to make also a bit of a loop that if for example, models are being created based on the common resources. So then if those are, enhanced, there would be incentives to send those, better models back to the platform company. Next slide. Then we looked at different segments of potential customers: public service providers, private service providers, the developers, and the research community, and the different services, what could be the key activities to manage the material, to process them, to clean them, things like that, and managing the rights, act as kind of a matchmaking between the resource users and providers. And then other potential added value services like consulting and education and marketing. And on the right-hand side, potential income sources, so licensing fees, maybe the biggest ones, but then professional services and events and such. Next slide. So then thinking of what potential forms this entity could have, so there were several options, but then in the end, we recommended that this kind of a public-private partnership model where the owners would come from both sides, public side and private side, would be maybe the best. And then also non-profit, at least in the beginning. So kind of clearly having a non-profit role, but with its own business model nevertheless, as described in the previous slide. Next slide. And then thinking of the road forward, so we have gone through some of these next steps. Who might be the kind of the leading person for this? Who could be the investors? How does this relate to the existing language bank, kielipankki activities? And testing the market, making the first sketches for the technologies and looking at the different agreements. And then a very important point was the link to ELG. Already in the spring, so we discussed with Georg that this could be an interesting opportunity also from the point of view of ELG to look at national developments. And I really completely think that that's true. And to me, it also sounds a little bit strange if Finland would start something like this completely disconnected from European language grid, because the goals are very similar. And that's a discussion that I would like to very much continue. And also then, well, the goal is that if everything goes now well, the initial funding is there and the legal entity will be formed in the first quarter of next year. And that's it. That's my presentation, and happy to discuss the story more. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Marco. Great. So let's immediately jump to Walter, and then I'm sure we come back to you, Marco, and your statements and your interesting concept for the Finnish language platform in the individual presentations and also in the question-answer session. So presenting the recent developments in Belgium, Walter Lademans.
Okay, good morning.
Hi. Morning.
This next slide, please. So there's actually not only recent developments I will talk about, but also an important event from the past, the Stephen program. And so we'll talk a little bit about our relationship in Belgium with Clarin and a new program that has been started up recently at the end of, at the beginning of this year. Next slide. So I think that everybody who was involved in that, a program which is quite old now, it stopped in 2011. I think it had a little bit of outflow until 2014, 2015, which was fairly small in funding, but actually made a very important message to the community, both in Flanders, the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and in the Netherlands, that working together transnationally actually pays off a lot. So it's this program that developed a lot of resources for speech and language technology, got industry interested in human language technology, also made us aware of each other's research, avoiding duplication. So there was a lot of very positive effects in this cooperation, which already existed between the Netherlands and Belgium in research, but not in organization. And so this was the first time, and it took a lot of convincing, it took a lot of work by civil servants from both countries and policymakers to make this happen, but it had an enormously positive effect on the position of Dutch in language technology. And so the resources that we developed then are now available through the Dutch Language Institute, and it's a very nice catalog, and the data is still being researched on and combined. And so my first question here for discussion is, do we need more than a good, regularly updated meta catalog to find locally developed resources? And my answer would be, yes, we do need that, because it's not just by having pointers to all these nice resources, often outdated and often not relevant anymore, but we should somehow keep these alive, make them evolve, combine them, integrate them in different new resources, etc. And so my question would be, at which level do we have to organize this? Because it will also concern multilingual resources that have to be actively worked on to be still relevant in the future and right now. The next slide, please. So second, a bit more negative experience was with Clarin. So Flanders as a region, so the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium cannot participate directly in Clarin. So for some time, the Dutch Language Union, which is a cultural organization supported by the ministries of culture by the Netherlands and Belgium, was able to represent us. But we see that there has really been a divergence. So the Netherlands has done very well in Clarin, has had a lot of impact in it, has also developed a lot of resources and made available a lot of resources, whereas this has withered away in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, because we simply couldn't participate in Clarin directly. So it had to happen through all kinds of intricate ways. And that's, of course, we can't help that it's the political situation, the fact that science funding is regionalized, but of course, politically, we are a multilingual country represented in Europe. So it's a very difficult situation, which makes me ask if perhaps Europe is a bit too inflexible for the language level as opposed to the national level. So talking to my colleagues with whom we cooperate very well in the French-speaking part of Belgium, they have exactly the same problems with trying to integrate their research and development with France, because there's no level of representation of language groups at the European level. So this is perhaps also something that we should keep in mind or discuss. And then my third slide. So next one, please. So recently we started in Flanders, again, because research and development is regionalized in Belgium, an AI program called AI Research Flanders. And so this is quite a big, for our standards, a big program. Like it's 17 million per year for basic research and education. There's not yet an end date, so it's supposed to go on in the future. And so language technology is represented in this program in one of the grand challenges in one work package. So it's actually quite a limited, say, allocation of funding to the specific topic of natural language processing. But what you see, of course, and this has been noted a number of times, and there have been also in MetaNet lots of connections, and in ELG and ELE lots of connections with the AI community. But you see that they are perhaps even taking over the field a bit. So my colleagues in machine learning in Flanders, in knowledge representation, even in image processing, working on multimodal systems, they are taking over the field of natural language processing as well, which is quite nice because there's a lot we can talk about and interact about, and there's a lot of joint development of algorithms and of applications. So that's good, but of course this is all in the spirit of deep neural networks. So a pattern matching approach to language processing. And what tends to be a bit a minority effort these days in these programs is what I think we mean with deep human language technology by 2030, which also involves, let's say, the deeper levels of language understanding, semantics, and knowledge representation. So this is just perhaps also something that we could discuss about. Given this convergence of methodology, so shouldn't we be more careful that we keep our own identity, especially in Europe, with our strong tradition in more logic and knowledge, linguistic knowledge-based approaches to human language technology. And well, that's actually it.
Thanks very much, Walter. Very, very good and relevant points. Thank you. Okay. Also, let's come back to your points in the question answer session later on. Next up is Bulgaria and Svetla Koeva. Svetla, the floor is yours. Are you there?
Thank you.
Ah, very good. Hi.
Good morning to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going briefly to present the Bulgarian NCC, namely Language Resources and Technologies for Bulgarian, recent activities and developments in Bulgaria, and our plans for further data identification, curation, and distribution. Next slide. The resources, tools, and services for Bulgarian are distributed mainly by European repositories such as MetaShare, ERC Share, ELG Platform, Clarin Inventory, and Euro Catalog. The number of the shared resources, tools, and services through these European platforms is quite impressive. Altogether, there are 421. However, most of the resources are monolingual and predominantly written corpora. There are only a few multilingual, multimodal resources, and as a whole, the inventory of resources is quite old-fashioned. We can conclude that there is a tremendous lack of resources for Bulgarian supporting the emerging language technologies and the artificial intelligence. There is only one national infrastructure dedicated to language resources, and it is focused on the preservation and allocation of resources related to linguistic, cultural, and historical heritage. The available resources are mainly developed at the research centers, and only recently, some of the data sets have been provided by the public administration under the ERC project. The main facts about the availability of human resources are quite positive. 280 high schools with ICT-focused curricula supported by solid language training, and over 15 universities offering programs in ICT. Thus, there is a critical mass of highly qualified and well-educated specialists in Bulgaria. However, research centers and IT companies operate in isolation, and most of developed resources and tools are not reused or reintegrated. There are funding opportunities for research and development in Bulgaria. For example, the National Scientific Fund supports language technology projects in common with all other topics, but there is no dedicated funding for Bulgarian language technologies yet. Next slide. Collecting information about language resources and services. The Bulgarian NCC collects national information about services, data sets, resources, tools, technologies, projects, research centers, experts, communities, companies, etc. Within LG, more than 150 potential stakeholders in Bulgaria that are involved in the creation or sharing of language resources and related activities were identified. And recently, the stakeholder base was updated. In June 2020, we organized the 4th International Conference on Computational Linguistics in Bulgaria, at which there was a special session dedicated to DLG. Dr. Georg Rem, the coordinator of DLG project, gave plenary talk at which he presented an overview of the European Language Grid project and made a demonstration of the emerging DLG technology platform. The event was broadcast live on YouTube. The identification of data holders and data providers is an ongoing task. Next slide, please. While the actors at the research centers are well known, the dynamics in the development of the IT sector in Bulgaria require special attention and investigation. In August 2020, there were 399 IT companies operating in Bulgaria. According to the National Statistical Institute in 2019, the companies which use social media are 33.8%, and the companies which operates with big data are 6.7%. The facts show that the domain is developing very quickly, and there is a need for mutualized language technologies, resources, and services, providing multilingual document classification, online computer-assisted translation, speech recognition and transcription, conversational systems, deep natural language understanding, and so on. Main challenges for sustainability data sharing remain the same: the uncovering of existing resources, the potential legal issues, and the lack of resources which are required for supporting the actual needs of the companies. Data and services integration at the ELG platform will provide better understanding to quality resources and better access to quality resources and tools, and will increase quality and coverage of multilingual solutions used by industrial players. Moreover, the sharing of resources and data will provide cost saving for private and public sector users of language technologies. For these reasons, our aims are broad coverage, high quality, and high precision of shared resources for Bulgaria. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Svetla. And without further ado, let's go virtually to Poland and to Maciej.
Good morning.
Are you there? Great.
Just need my presentation, thank you. So I'm Maciej, I'm from the Institute of Computer Science, Polish Academy of Sciences. I'm the head of the Linguistic Engineering group there, and yes, also an SC for Poland. I will tell you about the Polish landscape to give you some message about who needs to be involved in building the community around the LG and to make it success, and probably also how the legal entity should be created. So we have several research institutions involved in NLP and AI in Poland, and these two are inseparable today. And they are all scattered around major Polish cities led by Warsaw, located at universities, both technical and non-technical, and the Institute of Polish Academy of Science, such as mine. So this all looks nice at the first glance, and this is the research landscape of Poland. That's what you see when you start drawing it. Wrong. In 2017, when we started organizing POLEVAL, that's an evaluation campaign for Polish language technology, it occurred that not only research institutions were interested, but also the whole bunch of other categories of players. And could I have the next slide, please? So it occurred that there are actually 4 pillars of the Polish NLP. And the first one are the research-oriented institutions. It's just one of them, and the name research I use as a useful label because the remaining type of stakeholders also have research profile or have their own research centers. So here in the research box, we usually have IT departments of the universities, the institutes like mine, or the big consortia forming the research infrastructures. That's Clarin and Daraya. And I'm mentioning these two because Clarin is particularly strong in Poland, and Daraya is following. It received funding at the end of last week, so we are happy to be part of both. And the second pillar is the industry, the commercial world, and starting from big international players such as Samsung or IBM, very active in the field. We also have a Polish player in the big group, that's Allegro, our Polish eBay. It's currently the largest company listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. And we are cooperating with them in creating language models. They're also interested in doing high-level research. But we also have many middle-sized companies and startups. In the report about the NLP scene we recently prepared for ELG, there were more than 50 companies dealing just with NLP. They are usually EU-funded in its initial phase, which is good and bad at the same time, because I hope they can survive without the EU funds in the end, because that's how it should work. We start them and they are up. And we have government-based institutions as the third pillar. The ministries are mostly responsible for drafting strategic documents, but they're also governing national research institutes such as NASK or sorry, I muted myself incidentally. So, sorry. The National Research Institutes, such as NASK or the National Information Processing Institute, OPI, they also do a lot for the Polish NLP, and they are interested in research. And the fourth, usually neglected group are the skilled individuals, mostly in their 20s, who work as freelancers, want to learn and do new things. It's probably easier when you are 20 and not 40. And they are also doing wonderfully. So my message to take home is that we need to take all these four pillars to make it work, to create a successful environment for ELG. And also, if we have a plan to have a company, we need to involve them somehow to make use of what's created by all these types of stakeholders. And that's just me. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much. Very clear and concise and to the point, and also very challenging because it's only 4 groups here, but they are sizable, these groups. Thanks, Maciej, for your comments. Next up, we are moving to Spain and to Marta from Barcelona Supercomputing Center to talk about the Spanish situation. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting us. So I will talk about the synergies between the Spanish plan for language technologies and the European language grid. So if you can move next. So as you probably know, the plan for the language technologies in Spain was an initiative of the Spanish Ministry of Economy, and the objective was the promotion and development of natural language processing and machine translation for Spanish and also for the other official languages in Spain. The project started in 2015, and it has been implemented or organized into different sub-projects in strategic domains, and also through the collaboration with public administrations, universities and research centers, and also with companies, as you can see in this slide, right? So at BSC, we are responsible for the health domain sub-project and also for the development of the infrastructure and platform to support the whole plan, okay? So the current project ends in 2022, but we are working on finding new ways to continue, right? So you can visit the website, which is a bit out of date now, but still you can find there some nice resources and useful information and links. So if you can move, next one. Okay, for the platform, right? The platform will be ready next January. I apologize, there is a mistake here. It's not 2020, but 2021, right? It was my fault. So on the right, you can see the requirements that need to be covered by the platform. And on the left, you can see the 3 solutions provided. First one is the virtual machines ecosystem, let's say. The second one is the cloud computing solution, which is very, very similar to that of the ELG and includes OpenStack for the physical structure, Ranger for the cloud environment control, Kubernetes for orchestration of Dockers, containers, and Dockers as the preferred solution for service deployment, right? And finally, there is this high performance computing facilities, right? With Node 3, with the possibility of using up to 250 nodes. Obviously, this solution is not so open as the cloud computing solution or facility, right? But still, there is the possibility to grant users and allow them for some usage. Okay, we can move. Right in this slide, the picture or the figure on the right was taken from the ELG website, and it shows the 3 ways of contributing services to the project. With this solution, it should be very easy to contribute to the project and to the platform, especially because this includes this proxy strategy that implies having an external service running somewhere else. So if you can move. Yes, of course, for us, this is a natural way to cooperate and to contribute to the ELG platform. So we can easily deploy our Dockers and services, and we can follow this ELG API to easy this integration and collaboration, right? And the next slide. Yeah, finally for data. Up to now, all our data is in Zenodo, right? We use Zenodo because we get DOI for our resources. It allows large data sets. We are about to publish huge corporate models now in the next month. We are currently working with a massive corpus of Spanish general domain, and also for Catalan, and then also one for very big one for health domain in Spanish, and we are running the models. But coming back to the Zenodo, Zenodo provides us with a nice version control systems, and also this linking with GitHub and OpenAir, right? But in any case, we learned that ELG can ingest metadata from other registries and catalogs. And yesterday, I understood that ELG is planning also to ingest from Zenodo, right? So this will allow us to also contribute to ELG also with our data in an easy way, okay? So, and that's all from my side. Thanks. And if you have any question, I will be happy to answer.
Very good. Thanks, Marta, for your presentation and your comments. Last but not least, we are going to France and to François Yvon from LIMSI CNRS. François, the floor is yours. We can't hear you just yet. Katrin.
Is it okay now?
No, it works.
Okay, well, thanks. Sorry for the inconvenience. So thank you, Georg, for having me, and good morning, everyone. So I want to highlight a few recent initiatives that have been happening in France. So next slide, please. So basically, I will talk about the French roadmap on AI that was launched in 2018, and then discuss or mention a few initiatives in the area of data sharing, and also both from the public domain, but also from the private sector as well. So next slide, please. So in 2018, there was a big event following up a report that was commented by the President Macron. There was a big meeting where a few large-scale initiatives were announced and launched, and already they are providing some results. So first, I want to mention the setting up of a national computing infrastructure for AI that is up and running as of the beginning of this year and is expanding this year. And there has been also a few national research programs that have been launched, most of them on AI, but also as in Flanders or the Netherlands, a large part of this is related to HLT in general. And also what was important in Macron's speech was a reiteration of the importance of data on open data policy and also open science. And this also is already happening in several areas. So next slide, please. So I will start with what's happening in the academic sector. So we have been collecting resources for French for a long time, but what is new now is really that the general scheme is consolidating. We are now part of Clarine, and we have Clarine Center in France, and there is a coordinating body that is well identified and is funding these activities. That's the TGR Humanium. And so I think that in terms of what's happening in the academic sector and universities and research centers, now we're in a position that we know that we can develop resources, but also publish them and disseminate them through various channels. And what's also new is that in the academic sector, the fact that you publish resources and you develop resources is also now well recognized in your academic career, and it's encouraged and it's recognized. So it's also an incentive for young scholars to provide and to develop their resources and to publish them. So next slide, please. Next, I want to mention this initiative. So EtaLab is a French governmental agency that was launched following up the new European legislation on open data. And in the past years, they have been mostly publishing public data sets. But it's the first time in 2019, sorry, that we see them really getting interest into linguistic data, and for the first time they have been associated to a project that was aimed at developing resources for the French language. In this case, a large database of question and answers in French for open domain QA. And the results of this have been published in LREC papers this year, and the database is available on the EtaLab website. So it's really something that is new, and I hope to see more linguistic data from the public sector happen on this platform and be distributed through this platform in the coming years. So next slide, please. Next, I want to mention another initiative. So this one is a private and public sector association, mixed up associative. So it's called the Voice Lab, and it's an attempt to I think it's closely related to the project that was mentioned for Finland, but focusing only on speech data. So I mean the motivations and are about the same. It's to gather, share, annotate, and distribute speech data for businesses so that they can easily get the data they need for their application. And the target for this is about 100,000 hours of speech, representing all the domains and also all the accents of France in the first stage of the project, and then going up to develop a platform where this data can be shared and also used in applications and maybe also marketed. So it has been sometimes to shape, but now I think the project is well matured and is probably going to be launched next year with the development of the platform. And then I want to mention also finally a fully private initiative. So this one is launched by a company, by Sistran, who recently opened a marketplace where you can publish your machine translation models and get some reward by some credits by users that will use your your system. So you can, if you're a specialist in, say, machine translation for the medical domain, you can publish your models and then get users and feedbacks and also credits for using this model on the platform. So that's it for me, and I'd be happy to take questions about these various evolutions.
Great. Thank you very much, Francois, and also thank you to the other speakers. Much appreciated. And I would now, I have many questions, many comments, of course. I would now like to ask the audience if there are any questions. Katrin is telling me that there are no questions at all. Then let me just go quickly back to the list of panelists here. Okay, let me come back to what Marco presented for Finland. So the question is for Walter, Svetla, Maciej, Marta, and Francois. So the idea of establishing a national language platform, what Marco explained for the Finnish language and also for Swedish, for the Sami languages. And they identified in Finland with this activity and the pre-study, they identified a niche, or there is a gap in the national market, and there is no stakeholder yet or no organization that takes care of these activities that the new legal entity is supposed to take care of. How do you see it for your regions or for your countries? Is there a space for such a legal entity, for some kind of organization that could take care of something like this? Or is there no space? So, and maybe we can go through you one by one. Walter, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So in Belgium, we have two fairly large languages, French and Dutch represented. So it makes sense to that we would have separate organizations for let's say cooperating with France and the Netherlands, for example, in Europe, for collecting these resources and developing them, because the language is really the content that would have to be processed here, not so much let's say the regional or national structures. We have this organization I talked about, which is the Dutch Language Union, which is sounds worse than it is. It's just an administrative organization from ministries in Belgium and the Netherlands that try to for example, develop the official word list of the Dutch language, etc., which we share between the two countries. They have already played a very important role in developing resources for Dutch language technology, and especially in the time of the Steven program, which I talked about. But this has sort of withered away with the end of that type of funding. It's very hard to organize something transnationally. It has become much harder than it used to be in the past. So I think so perhaps ELG or at the European level, this could be somehow handled, but then there's all these rules about funding also at the European level that makes it impossible for regions to really apply for funding, for example, for such initiatives. So so I think we should really solve this at the European level. I think that's the right level to do.
That's a good point. Belgium is a very peculiar case in that regard, which needs to be addressed, obviously. Okay, thank you. And Svetla.
We think that really there is a lot of work that has to be done, and for sure, if this is done at European level, this would be very helpful for everyone. On the other hand, there should be a national entity which will help, which will collect, curate, process data. So I think that we should go in both directions, acting at the European level and acting at the national level. What I can say for the NNC in Bulgaria, it will continue work on this area. So we will help either by our National Language Institute or by an entity which will be related with it. I cannot say for the with sure, because it's too early to say, but I'm sure that we are going to work for this to help promoting, populating language resources, tools, and services at the LG platform, because it's really very, very important.
Yeah, the National Language Institutes, thank you very much. The National Language Institutes are an obvious candidate for this role, but simply historically, there's a large disconnect between national language institutes and then digital technologies and the startup space and making digital resources available in a large scale way. That's new, I think, to all of the national language institutes, or at least to most of the national language institutes as I know them throughout Europe. And I guess there must be a reason in Finland, we haven't talked about this, Marco, why the National Language Institute in Finland hasn't been tasked with this activity, which could be a follow-up question for later on. But first, let's go to Maciej. What are your thoughts on this topic with regard to Poland?
Yes, thank you. Getting back to the idea of a company, I always thought, let me comment on that, I always thought that ELG, or what's coming next, should be such a company. So it should be some pan-European creation that builds on what we currently have, because we already have a great technological platform. We all have all these resources and information, know-how about who is involved and what we can do with language technology for our languages. If we want to let people use it, because the demand will always come from the users, yes? So what we can do is we can concentrate on providing the technology and the ways of using it or paying for it. So if we have ELG or some organization created after the project by the ones who are interested, they don't have to be all of us, then we can probably employ or ask individuals from different countries, because it always needs to have some national character. When people start coming, you need to have someone to respond to their needs. But the core should be pan-European. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Point taken. Point taken. Thank you. And Marta, what about Spain?
Yeah, I have to apologize. I didn't listen the question. I have problems with my connection. So can you repeat again? Sorry.
Yeah, the question was the concept and idea that Marco presented for Finland of establishing a non-profit company or a public-private partnership to take care of this role and responsibility of collecting language data, curating language data, maybe even doing some consulting services and having a company, a non-profit company taking care of this. Is this something that you could see for the landscape in Spain? Would that make sense?
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, in a way, the plan, right? The Spanish plan partially is something like this. Okay, it includes this idea of on the one side distributing, promoting languages by using the public administration as a demanding sector and promoting the participation of industries, companies, and research centers, but also the idea of having a technical office that collects data, produces, redistributes resources, basic resources, and basic data to the community and to the industry. I think it's more or less resembles. I mean, I think it's a good idea, and it's something that the plan also tries to do.
Okay, thank you. And Francois.
Yes, thanks. I mean, in my first, I would like to mention that in my talk, I was cautious to distinguish between initiatives that are taken in the research sector, and also in the state sector and in the private domain sectors. And because I mean, they have different needs and they have different requirements as well. I mean, we have different licenses for our software, and this is exactly the reason why. I mean, not everybody can have the same interest in such ventures. So then I'd like to remind everyone that the language do not necessarily overlap with countries. Walter already made this point, and this is even more true for minority languages, where we often see communities that speak the language of another country. So I think that having just national solutions is not the way to go. I mean, in general. Then the development of the Voice Lab initiative I mentioned is a sign that there is a need for, at least for business purposes, the need to find ways of to organize the sector in such a way that data can be shared. I mean, we have more and more players, business players. They have data, and they'd like to find ways to use this data, to share this data. And this is not so easily done as is done in research, where I think for research now we have nice infrastructures and we have ways to share data all over Europe, and that's well accepted, organized. It has taken a long time, but now it's there. For the private domain sector, it's really different. They're just realizing the value of their data. They're collecting data by very large numbers, and I mean there is a need for them to organize the data sharing issue, and that's why I think the Voice Lab initiative has some future in France, at least for the speech sector, and maybe that we will see the same for other resources like for machine translation or for written NLP in general.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And we have a couple of questions now already collected in the tool, but I would like to quickly come back to Marco. And my question that I haven't had before, it was just an idea. Have you discussed the mission of the legal entity and this need that you have for the legal entity with the I forget the name. I'm trying to remember it, but I can't. With the Finnish Language Institute, or I think it's the National Institute for the Finnish Language. I think it's the official name.
Yes, we do have that, and yes, they've been involved in the discussions. That would be one option for the route for the, let's say, completely public platform, publicly driven. Our rationale was that to be more, let's say, startup friendly and business driven as well. So some buy-in from the business side would be beneficial. Also, the technical skills for running such an operation are quite high. Demand for or the needs for the technical skills are quite high. So again, we felt that this sort of public-private option would make more sense.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. It does make sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. Katrin and Stephanie, what about the questions that we collected in the tool?
Let me see. So we have one question that is related to the Finnish situation. It is from Jörg Tiedemann, who was on our panel yesterday. Mm-hmm. In the Finnish case, is there also a discussion about collaboration with Sweden in the case of Swedish language, and Sweden / Norway in the Sami language case, and even Finnish as a minority language in Sweden?
excellent question, and then also well aligned with the previous discussions that well, in fact, we are not talking about maybe only national solutions, and we need to look at how the use of different languages is spread over different countries. And yes, actually, we have been discussing with various players in Sweden, and I don't know quite the latest what the development is, but for example, for this donate speech type of campaign, there was a lot of interest, kind of the knowledge about understanding the legal issues, legal requirements. So we already made some headway there, and maybe there is also kind of a possibility to somehow join forces as we move forwards with the idea of the legal entity, but that's a little bit too early to say, but the discussions are in place, let's put it that way.
Great, and maybe the connection to ELG can also help with the matchmaking between the different stakeholders in the various countries.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this just yet. And there's one more question, I think, or two?
Yes, then we have another question by Tuba Arslan from CESTEC. The question is, are the language communities involved only local participants, or can organizations from other countries contribute to or exploit from these communities? I think this also goes to this Finnish case, but I'm not quite sure because that doesn't set here.
Well, I guess that's a more general question, and maybe Georg can also answer that. But in our case, so we are more than happy to discuss with organizations or individuals interested in what we are doing in Finland who are not from Finland. So I mean, we are definitely for open approach and exchange of ideas and practices and so forth, especially in this European collaboration.
Yes, and the same is true for us. I guess for all of us, that we are always interested in collecting input, collecting ideas and feedback for everything, right? So does ELG make sense as a setup, as a platform? Are all the features there or on the roadmap that we need or that you need as users of the platform, as providers of the platform? And especially that's true for ELE and the upcoming European Language Equality Project, where we will do many consultations also on the national level. Yeah, we explained this in the previous session. I'm now jumping back to the previous session. So we have these 30 academic partners in various countries, covering all of Europe and all European Union member states, who will organize such consultation rounds. Yeah, so there will be ample opportunity to provide feedback and input and good ideas. We're always looking for good ideas. One more?
We have one last question that goes to Walter. So it's from Mike Rosner. Walter, if you merge AI tech and lang tech, where do you fit the issues that tend to specify language related, like translation quality, like a translation quality evaluation, like data collection, processing, and representation, and so on? So that's a rather specific question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a very good point, and I think that's one of the reasons that we shouldn't completely integrate HLT with the other efforts in artificial intelligence. Of course, our field is very interdisciplinary, so there are many connections, but there are things which are specific to let's say our content that we are working on, the data we are working on, and so you will have noticed that my questions on the slides were ambiguous all the time. So you could have the one position would be, yeah, why not just integrate NLP with deep learning efforts in other areas of artificial intelligence? But that's just what I would like to warn against, because that I also saw the comment by Andy, which I completely agree with. We have seen these paradigms come and go. It's only the NLP people,